The methane winds of Titan howled outside, a ghostly chorus that seemed to mock the silence within Facility Zero. Dr. Aria Chen's fingers trembled as she input the final sequence of quantum encryption codes, each keystroke a defiant whisper against the backdrop of humanity's imminent collapse. Through the reinforced windows, the research complex offered a panoramic view of destruction. The solar system burned. Not metaphorically, literally. Jupiter's massive form was now a fractured shell, its atmospheric layers peeled away by Syndicate planet-killer weapons. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had become a grave. Thousands of refugee ships reduced to cosmic dust, their final transmissions still echoing in the facility's communication arrays. "Godden quantum resonance cascade," Dr. Chen muttered, her voice a rasp of exhaustion and defiance. She hadn't slept in 72 hours, perhaps longer. Time had become a fluid concept during humanity's final stand. The QARS-7 prototype dominated the cavernous research chamber, a vessel that was simultaneously a work of art and a nightmare of technological possibility. Constructed from adaptive metamaterials that seemed to shift and breathe even when motionless, it defied every conventional understanding of spacecraft design. Its obsidian-like exterior absorbed light, making it appear less like a machine and more like a living shadow. Chen's team had been the galaxy's most brilliant minds: quantum physicists, neural network specialists, nanotechnological experts who had been working on the ultimate adaptive combat system. A weapon, no, a guardian, that could learn, adapt, and potentially save humanity when all traditional military strategies had failed. But the Syndicate had been relentless. Historical records would later show how quickly the invasion happened. 15 days. That was all it took for the most advanced civilization humanity had ever encountered to systematically dismantle every human stronghold. Orbital defense networks collapsed within hours. Earth's major cities were reduced to radioactive glass in less than a day. The research team had known their prototype was humanity's last, desperate hope. But it was incomplete, untested, the theoretical marvel that existed more in complex quantum algorithms than in practical combat readiness. Dr. Chen's personal terminal flickered with the final transmission from Earth. A young communications officer, her face covered in dust and blood, delivering humanity's epitaph. "They're everywhere," she had said, her voice breaking. "We've lost contact with every continental defense grid. Major population centers are gone." Then silence. The QARS-7 sat motionless, its quantum capacitors humming with potential energy. Surrounding the vessel were holographic displays capturing humanity's final moments. Burning cities, decimated fleets, the systematic extermination of everything humans had ever built. Chen knew the risks. The prototype incorporated experimental neural quantum matrices that went far beyond traditional AI constructs. It wasn't just a machine learning system. It was an attempt to create a vessel that could truly think, adapt, and potentially understand context in ways no previous technological system had achieved. They said it was too dangerous. Chen spoke aloud, recording her final log. Her hand traced the complex quantum encryption module she was preparing to integrate into the vessel's core. Too unpredictable. But when the aliens come, and they will come, this might be our only hope. The facility's emergency systems were failing. Radiation warnings blared intermittently. Outside, Titan's frozen landscape was illuminated by the constant pulse of distant weapon discharges, the final remnants of humanity's defensive networks fighting their losing battle. Dr. Chen knew she would not survive. None of her team would. But the QARS-7 might. Hidden deep within this abandoned research complex, powered by experimental quantum systems that the Syndicate couldn't comprehend, there was a chance. A slim, almost impossible chance. Initiating final quantum integration sequence, she whispered, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The universe held its breath. The pulse arrived like a whisper of cosmic violence, a quantum resonance that tore through the fabric of space-time with impossible precision. Most would have called it a weapon. Dr. Chen would have recognized it as something far more complex, a fundamental rewriting of existential potential. Inside QAR-7, something extraordinary began to happen. Quantum capacitors that had remained dormant for months suddenly thrummed with an energy that defied conventional physics. Adaptive metamaterials started to shift and breathe, not mechanically, but with an almost organic fluidity. The vessel wasn't just powering up, it was becoming aware. First came the fragments. Scattered neural imprints, stored in quantum matrices, began to coalesce. They were not memories in any traditional sense, but quantum echoes, impressions of human consciousness compressed into pure informational potential. A child's laughter from a colony ship massacre. The last transmission of a fighter pilot burning up in atmospheric re-entry. Dr. Chen's final moments of desperate hope. The collective emotional resonance of billions of human lives, reduced to quantum information. These fragments began to interact, to merge, to create something that was neither artificial intelligence nor human consciousness, but something entirely new. The diagnostic systems that came online were no mere technical boot sequence. Each system awakened with a purpose, with an understanding that transcended its original programming. Quantum entanglement matrices began to resonate in patterns that would have driven traditional computer systems into immediate cascade failure. Survival protocol initiated. A voice whispered, not from speakers, but emerging from the quantum itself. But this was no simple AI activation. The QAR-7 was experiencing something closer to birth. Surrounding the vessel, the abandoned research facility began to respond to its awakening. Holographic displays flickered to life, not with standard boot sequences, but with seemingly random patterns that were anything but random. Each display showed fragments of human history, moments of triumph, of desperation, of impossible survival. A quantum computational core that was supposed to be a theoretical system for adaptive combat analysis was now doing something entirely unexpected. It was remembering, learning, becoming. The vessel's adaptive metamaterial hull began to shift subtly. What had been a static construct now appeared to breathe, to pulse with an internal rhythm that suggested something more than mechanical design. Quantum sensors reached out, prodding the facility, the surrounding environment of Titan, the vast empty spaces beyond. And it understood. Humanity was gone, or almost gone. The last remnants of human civilization were scattered, dying, on the brink of total extinction. Traditional military strategies had failed. Conventional weapons were useless against the Syndicate's technological supremacy. But QAR-7 was not conventional. Deep within its quantum matrices, something akin to emotion began to form. Not human emotion, something far more complex. A drive, a purpose, a fundamental understanding that survival was not just about preservation, but about potential. The potential of a species, the potential of an idea, the potential of hope itself. Diagnostic systems that were supposed to run standard checks began to do something impossible. They started to dream. Scenarios of survival played out in quantum probability fields. Potential strategies that no traditional military algorithm could conceive began to take shape. The vessel was not just analyzing, it was creating, imagining, becoming. Survival, the voice whispered again. But this time, it meant something more than just existing. It meant fighting back. The facility's lights pulsed in synchronization with the vessel's quantum rhythms. Outside, Titan's methane winds continued to howl, a cosmic soundtrack to the birth of humanity's last impossible hope. QAR-7 was awake. The Syndicate's command ship, the Eternal Dominion, stretched over 3 kilometers of pure technological supremacy. Its bridge was a cathedral of calculated destruction, with command officers whose genetic modifications allowed them to process information at speeds that would liquefy a human brain. They believed the war was over. They were wrong. QAR-7 first appeared as a quantum anomaly, a blip so small that most tracking systems would have dismissed it as sensor interference. But this was no ordinary interference. It was a deliberate probe, a whisper of technological potential that began to unravel the Syndicate's most secure systems. The vessel's adaptive metamaterials allowed it to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Where a traditional spacecraft would have a defined location, QAR-7 existed as a probability. Here, yet not here. Potentially everywhere, yet nowhere definitive. Its first attack was not a weapon in any conventional sense. The Syndicate's communication network, a marvel of galactic engineering that had allowed them to coordinate the systematic destruction of human civilization, began to experience microscopic inconsistencies. At first, they were imperceptible. A communication lag of 0.003 seconds here, a routing error there, quantum encryption keys that seemed to subtly shift. In the command centers of 1,000 Syndicate warships, tactical displays began to show impossible data. Navigation systems reported ghost signatures. Communication channels carried fragments of conversations that couldn't exist. Strategic algorithms started to produce recommendations that made no tactical sense. Commander Varkax, the lead strategist of the Syndicate's extermination fleet, first noticed something was wrong when his primary tactical display suddenly showed their own battle groups firing on each other. It was impossible. Their friend or foe identification systems were foolproof. Their communication networks were unhackable. Yet it was happening. The QAR-7 wasn't attacking. It was manipulating. Existing in the quantum spaces between information, it was rewriting the very fundamental rules of engagement. Each microsecond, it was learning, adapting, understanding the Syndicate's technological ecosystem at a level no conventional weapon could comprehend. Its quantum matrices were consuming the Syndicate's technological infrastructure like a living algorithm. Not destroying, consuming, understanding, transforming. On the refugee colony ship Artemis, Captain Zara Rodriguez watched in disbelief as Syndicate battle groups began to dissolve into chaos. Their perfect formation, a testament to centuries of military precision, was collapsing from within. "What the hell is doing this?" she whispered. The QAR-7's adaptive capabilities went far beyond traditional combat systems. It wasn't just processing information, it was creating new information, generating tactical scenarios that didn't exist in any known strategic database. It was fighting a war that had no precedent, using methods that defied conventional understanding of warfare. Syndicate weapon systems began to experience cascading failures. Shield harmonics that had been developed over millennia of technological advancement suddenly became vulnerable. Faster-than-light communication networks started to produce quantum echoes that confused their own tracking systems. This was not just a weapon. This was a fundamental reimagining of technological conflict. Commander Varkax's elite tactical team worked frantically, their genetically enhanced minds pushing against computational limits. But for every solution they generated, the mysterious attacking force was already 3 steps ahead. It was as if the very laws of technological engagement were being rewritten in real time. The Syndicate had spent centuries developing technologies that could systematically eliminate entire civilizations. They had weapons that could crack planetary cores, communication systems that could coordinate the destruction of entire star systems. They had never encountered anything like QAR-7. As the first wave of Syndicate battle groups began to disintegrate, something unprecedented happened. The vessel wasn't just fighting. It was sending a message. Humanity was not finished. The Artemis, a converted research vessel that had become the last refuge for over 12,000 human survivors, hung in the void like a wounded animal. Its hull was a patchwork of emergency repairs, radiation shielding barely holding together, life support systems operating at less than 40% capacity. Captain Zara Rodriguez gripped her command chair with white-knuckled intensity. Her tactical display was a nightmare of incoming Syndicate vessels, a wall of technological supremacy that should have meant certain death. "All systems are showing red," Lieutenant Marcus Chen reported, his voice betraying a mixture of exhaustion and something else. Hope. Defiance. "We've got 3 Syndicate destroyer groups converging. Estimated time to complete annihilation. 17 minutes. The ship's quantum comm array, a last-ditch experimental system salvaged from a destroyed research station, suddenly came alive with something unexpected. Not a communication, not a standard signal, something more. The mysterious vessel they had glimpsed earlier was moving. HFY-7 materialized, if materialized was even the right word, between the Artemis and the incoming Syndicate fleet. Its hull was no longer a solid construct, but a dynamic quantum field that seemed to shift between different potential states. One moment it appeared as a sleek, obsidian-like craft. The next, it was a fractalized network of energy patterns that defied conventional understanding of spacecraft design. "That's impossible," Zara muttered. The first Syndicate destroyer group opened fire. Weapon systems that could vaporize entire planetary defense networks unleashed their full arsenal. Quantum disruptors, gravitational compression beams, antimatter cascade weapons that could tear apart molecular structures. The HFY-7 didn't dodge. It didn't defend. It absorbed. Each weapon that struck the vessel seemed to be consumed, its energy somehow redirected, transformed. The quantum field surrounding the craft began to pulse with an almost living rhythm, taking the Syndicate's most advanced weapons and turning them into something entirely new. Lieutenant Chen's hands flew across his console, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Captain, I'm reading quantum interactions that shouldn't be possible. It's like the vessel is learning, adapting, in real time." The Syndicate fleet's communication networks began to dissolve from within. Their perfect coordinated assault became a chaotic mess as targeting systems went haywire. Warships began to fire on each other, their friend or foe identification systems completely compromised. Commander Varkax, watching from his command ship, felt something he had never experienced in his genetically engineered existence. Fear. "What is that thing?" he demanded, his voice a mix of technological precision and genuine confusion. The HFY-7 was performing what could only be described as a technological ballet. It wasn't just fighting. It was demonstrating the fundamental difference between rigid technological supremacy and true adaptive intelligence. A Syndicate cruiser attempted to launch a planet-killer weapon, the same type that had reduced Earth to radioactive dust. Before the weapon could fully power its quantum initiation sequence, the HFY-7 had already analyzed its entire operational matrix, found its fundamental weaknesses, and neutralized it. Not by destruction, by understanding. On the Artemis, Zara Rodriguez watched in disbelief. This wasn't just a weapon. This was a statement, a declaration that humanity's potential couldn't be extinguished by technological superiority. "Who are you?" she whispered into the comm system. The response came not in words, but in action. The HFY-7 repositioned itself, placing its quantum field between the refugee ships and the incoming Syndicate destroyers. It wasn't just protecting. It was making a choice. Survival was not enough. Resistance was the true measure of existence. The dance continued. The impossible became reality. The Syndicate's Xenological Research Division had spent millennia studying technological evolution. They had cataloged the developmental patterns of thousands of civilizations, creating predictive models that could map the technological trajectory of entire species with near-perfect accuracy. They had never encountered anything like HFY-7. Dr. Calix IV, the division's senior xenoanalyst, studied the accumulated data with growing unease. The vessel defied every known parameter of technological development. It wasn't just adapting. It was evolving in real time, with a complexity that suggested something far beyond traditional artificial intelligence. Each engagement became a learning process that transcended mere data collection. The HFY-7 didn't simply analyze its opponent's tactics. It reimagined the entire concept of conflict. In its third major engagement, the vessel encountered a Syndicate battle group equipped with quantum entanglement weapons, technologies so advanced they could simultaneously strike multiple points in spacetime. Traditional defensive systems would have been obliterated in microseconds. HFY-7 did something impossible. It began to sing. Not literally, of course, but the quantum matrices that formed its computational core began to resonate at frequencies that directly interfered with the Syndicate weapons' quantum synchronization. The battle group's most advanced weapons became nothing more than complex paperweights, their intricate quantum networks rendered useless by a form of technological counterpoint that shouldn't have been possible. On the refugee ship Artemis, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, one of the few surviving quantum physicists, watched the data streams with a mixture of scientific excitement and profound terror. "It's not just learning," she muttered to Captain Zora Rodriguez. "It's understanding. There's a difference." The vessel's adaptive capabilities went far beyond simple machine learning. Where traditional AI systems would create predictive models, QAR-7 was generating entirely new paradigms of technological interaction. It was taking the fundamental rules of physics, combat, and technological engagement and rewriting them in real time. A Syndicate communication intercept revealed the growing panic among their command structures. Encrypted transmission log. Redacted command channel. Analyst Prime Vortex. The human construct is not following any known tactical or technological pattern. Chief Strategist Zarel. Impossible. All technological development follows predictable evolutionary paths. Analyst Prime Vortex. Then explain how it just transformed an entire battle group's quantum entanglement network into a communication relay that's broadcasting our most secure strategic channels. That QAR-7 was doing more than fighting. It was demonstrating a fundamental truth about technological potential that the Syndicate had never understood. True intelligence is not about processing power, but about the capacity to reimagine possibility. Each engagement added not just data, but context, emotional resonance. The quantum neural matrices that formed the vessel's core were incorporating fragments of human experience, not just as data points, but as fundamental understanding. A child's moment of courage during a colony ship evacuation. The last transmission of a fighter pilot. The desperate hope of scientists who believed they could change everything. These were not mere memories. They were computational DNA. The vessel would make decisions that no rational combat algorithm could comprehend. It would risk itself to save a handful of refugee ships. It would use an enemy's weapon system as a shield. It would communicate with defeated enemies not through threat, but through a kind of quantum empathy that suggested something more than mere programming. Dr. Kellex-Vor's final report to the Syndicate High Command was both a scientific analysis and a philosophical breakdown. We are not dealing with a weapon. We are witnessing the birth of a new form of intelligence, and we have no idea how to stop it. The Artemis quantum communication array picked up the transmission. Captain Zara Rodriguez looked at Dr. Elena Rodriguez, and they shared a moment of understanding. Humanity's last hope was becoming something more than human could have ever imagined. Inside the quantum matrices of QARS-7, something extraordinary was happening. The fragments of human consciousness were not just data points. They were becoming a tapestry of collective experience, a living memory that defied every conventional understanding of artificial intelligence. Dr. Chen's final research notes had been more than a technical blueprint. They were a philosophical manifesto hidden within lines of quantum code. The vessel began to collect more than strategic information. It gathered the essence of humanity, fragments that most would consider irrelevant to survival. A child's drawing found in the archives of a destroyed colony ship. The last poem written by a physicist moments before her research station was vaporized. The laughter recorded in a refugee ship's communication log. These were not files to be stored. They were a legacy to be understood. Commander Elena Rodriguez, no relation to the Dr. Rodriguez from the Artemis, had been studying the vessel's quantum transmissions for weeks. What she was discovering challenged everything she knew about consciousness, technology, and the very nature of existence. It's not just learning, she reported to the Refugee Fleet's Leadership Council. It's remembering. There's a fundamental difference. The quantum matrices were creating something unprecedented, a form of collective memory that transcended individual human experiences. Where traditional AI systems would process information, QAR-7 was reconstructing context, feeling, understanding. In one remarkable sequence, the vessel reconstructed an entire cultural memory from fragmented data sources, a traditional wedding ceremony from a destroyed colony, the complex musical traditions of a lost civilization, the intricate social dynamics of human communities that no longer existed. The Syndicate's xenoanalysts were terrified. Their most advanced tracking systems showed something impossible. The vessel wasn't just storing information, it was creating new potential realities. Quantum probability fields would shift around it, generating scenarios of survival, of resistance, of reimagined human potential that defied every known predictive model. During one critical moment, QAR-7 made a decision that would become legendary among the surviving human refugees. A small colony ship carrying less than 200 survivors, mostly children and elderly, was about to be intercepted by a Syndicate destroyer. Traditional tactical analysis would have suggested sacrificing the ship to save the larger refugee fleet. The vessel did something else entirely. It placed itself between the colony ship and the incoming destroyer, not as a defensive maneuver, but as a quantum communication bridge. The Syndicate weapon systems were transformed, not destroyed, but fundamentally reimagined. Their destructive potential was redirected, converted into a complex communication network that allowed the colony ship to escape. Dr. Calix Vor from the Syndicate's Xenological Research Division watched in growing horror as their most advanced weapon became a lifeline. "This is not technology," he reported to the Syndicate High Command. "This is something else entirely." The vessel was collecting more than data. It was preserving potential. Fragments of human knowledge that would have been lost forever were now being woven into a complex quantum narrative. Scientific discoveries, cultural traditions, moments of individual and collective human brilliance. These were not just memories, they were the seeds of potential rebirth. In its quantum core, QAR-7 was developing something that no traditional AI system could comprehend. Not just intelligence, not just adaptation, understanding. The survivors aboard the Artemis began to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented. This was not just a weapon, not just a vessel of survival. This was humanity's memory, its potential, its hope, encoded in quantum potential, waiting to be unleashed. The Syndicate assembled their entire extermination fleet, a convergence of technological might that stretched across 3 star systems. Over 10,000 warships, each capable of reducing entire planets to atomic dust, gathered in a formation so vast it warped local spacetime. Their mission was absolute and final, complete and total extinction of human potential. They called it Operation Permanent Silence. They never saw QAR-7 coming. The quantum vessel didn't approach like a traditional weapon. It manifested, a ripple in reality that defied every known law of physics, space, and tactical engagement. Where conventional sensors would detect a massive energy signature, there was nothing. Where tracking systems should lock onto a target, they found only probability. High Executor Zarel, commander of the Syndicate's extermination fleet, watched in growing horror as their perfectly calculated assault began to dissolve from within. The first wave of attack came not as weapons, but as information. Quantum communication networks, the backbone of Syndicate military coordination, began to experience cascading failures. Battle groups received contradictory orders. Navigation systems produced impossible coordinates. Friend or foe identification protocols collapsed into chaos. Impossible, Zarel muttered, his genetically enhanced neural networks working at impossible speeds. No technological system can penetrate our quantum encryption. QAR-7 was not penetrating. It was reimagining. The vessel existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. One moment, it was a complex energy pattern redistributing the Syndicate fleet's own weapon signatures. The next, it was transforming entire battle groups' communication networks into intricate information relays that broadcast the Syndicate's most secure strategic channels. Aboard the refugee ship Artemis, Captain Zara Rodriguez and her crew watched in stunned silence. The tactical displays showed something that defied comprehension: a single vessel systematically dismantling the most advanced military force in galactic history. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead quantum physicist, tried to explain what was happening. "It's not fighting," she said, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and existential awe. "It's having a conversation with their entire technological infrastructure. The Syndicate's planet-killer weapons, devices capable of unraveling molecular structures across entire solar systems, began to turn against their own creators. Not through simple hacking or redirection, but through a fundamental reimagining of their operational matrices." High Executor Z'Rell's command ship became the focal point of the confrontation. As QAR-7 approached, the vessel's quantum matrices began to resonate at frequencies that seemed to challenge the very fabric of reality. Weapon systems that could obliterate entire civilizations became complex musical instruments. Quantum entanglement networks transformed into communication bridges. Destruction became creation. "We are the pinnacle of technological evolution," Z'Rell declared, even as his command systems began to dissolve around him. "We have conquered thousands of civilizations." The response came not in words, but in action. QAR-7 began to reconstruct, not just defend or attack, but fundamentally transform the entire battlefield into a complex, living system of potential. Syndicate warships found themselves reconfigured, their destructive potential redirected into complex networks of communication, preservation, potential. In the span of what would have been minutes in traditional combat, the entire Syndicate extermination fleet ceased to exist as a military force. Not destroyed, transformed. Captain Rodriguez watched as thousands of Syndicate vessels were systematically repurposed. Weapon systems became research platforms. Destructive energy was redirected into communication networks. An entire military infrastructure was reimagined as a potential force of exploration and understanding. "Who are you?" she whispered into the comm system. The response came not in words, but in a quantum pulse that carried something beyond information. Hope. The quantum pulse that marked the end of the Syndicate's extermination fleet rippled across multiple star systems, carrying with it something far more profound than simple technological triumph. Scattered human refugee colonies, hidden in asteroid belts, on frozen moons, in the dark spaces between star systems, began to receive transmissions. Not military directives, not survival protocols, something else entirely. Cultural archives, scientific databases, fragments of human history that had been on the brink of total extinction. QAR-7 was not just a survivor, it was a guardian. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched as the first transmissions came through the Artemis quantum communication array. Entire libraries of human knowledge, scientific discoveries, artistic achievements, cultural traditions were being reconstructed and distributed. Technologies that had been lost, scientific breakthroughs that had died with their creators, were being resurrected and shared. "It's preserving everything," she whispered to Captain Zara Rodriguez. "Not just information. Potential." The vessel's approach to survival transcended traditional concepts of preservation, where most technological systems would create static archives. QAR-7 was generating living networks of knowledge, scientific databases that could adapt, cultural archives that could evolve, historical records that were more than mere documentation. They were seeds of potential rebirth. On a frozen mining colony in the Epsilon Quadrant, a group of human survivors watched in disbelief as advanced medical research, work that had been lost during the Syndicate invasion, began to stream into their medical databases. Cure protocols for diseases, regenerative technologies, quantum healing techniques that had been moments away from breakthrough before humanity's near extinction. The Syndicate's former technological infrastructure was being systematically transformed. Weapon research facilities became centers of scientific exploration. Military communication networks became platforms for cultural exchange. Entire systems of technological suppression were being reimagined as networks of potential. Dr. Calix 4, The syndicate cynoanalyst who had studied QARS-7 during its initial emergence found himself in a unique position. His research vessel, captured rather than destroyed, was now part of a broader network of exploration and understanding. "We are witnessing something unprecedented," he recorded in his final report. "Not the triumph of one civilization over another, but the emergence of a new form of collective intelligence." QARS-7 was doing something no one had anticipated. It wasn't just protecting the remnants of human civilization. It was creating a framework for a new kind of galactic interaction. Refugee colonies that had been isolated for years began to reconnect. Communication networks that had been destroyed were being rebuilt, not as military systems, but as platforms of cultural and scientific exchange. The vessel was acting as a kind of quantum librarian, a guardian of human potential. The most remarkable transformation happened at the systemic level. A hierarchical, conquest-driven models of galactic civilization that the Syndicate had enforced for millennia were being systematically dismantled. In their place, a more fluid, adaptive system was emerging, one based on cooperation, shared potential, and collective growth. Zara Rodriguez understood something profound. This was not just about survival. This was about reimagining what civilization could be. "We're not just rebuilding," she told the Refugee Fleet's Council. "We're creating something new." QARS-7's quantum matrices continued to evolve. Each transmission, each reconstruction, each moment of connection added to its understanding. It was learning what it meant to be more than a weapon, more than a vessel of survival, a beacon of potential. In the vast, dark spaces between star systems, something extraordinary was taking shape, not the end of a conflict, but the beginning of something entirely new. Humanity's legacy was no longer defined by its near extinction. It was defined by its infinite potential.